Well, hello everyone. It is Karen Ann Harlos with another episode of Jurassic Dictionary, where we examine old, dead, dying, or just plain almost dead or dying, or just plain interesting, unusual words. Even better if there is some cool historical spin to them. So, what is the word for this episode? I am not even sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, and you'll see why I couldn't even find how to pronounce it correctly. And that word is Culliage. Culliage. I got that word from a book I've been referencing, though I've got a ton of historical word books, but this is the one I've been referencing lately, which is Word Museum. And it attributes it to an author, and I'm probably going to mess up this name too, Dice, it's D-Y-C-H-E, and it states that it is an ancient Scottish custom of giving the lord, or let's say laird, the liberty of lying the first night with his vassals newlywed. Ooh la la. So I went off to my trusty paid subscription of the Oxford English Dictionary, expecting, to find a whole lot in this, because I had heard of this alleged custom before, and guess what? There was nothing. So I fired up trusty Google, and guess what I found? Nothing. Goose egg. Nada. I was like, so it's only in Word Museum? But I wasn't going to give up. So I just searched the concept in general of the king or the lord, having like first night betting rights. So let me get out my trusty notes here and put on my old lady glasses. And I found something on Wikipedia. And I know, don't groan. I think Wikipedia is good for things like that. And it says, droit de seigneur, maybe pronouncing that right, which they translate as right of the Lord, also known as prima noctis, for right of the first night, sometimes referred to as prima nocta, was a supposed legal right in medieval Europe, allowing feudal lords to have sexual relations with any female subject. Now that broadened it a bit, but particularly on her wedding night. And that Wikipedia article noted that although there are many references to this subject, it is really disputed whether it's actually real or something that was invented after the fact to make the nobility look really bad. But I tend to think there are too many references for this to be entirely made up. I mean, there are a lot of references. But despite that, also, as I said, dictionary.com says, while there are many references, as I said, to the custom throughout the centuries, scholars since the 1800s have questioned whether such a law truly existed or was practiced. Well, I don't think it needed to be a law to be a custom, with many believing it was simply a trope used to make rulers seem more barbaric. It is possible that prima nocta may have been real, and because its victims had no or low social status, the instances were never recorded. But if we have so many references to it, aren't the instances recorded? Maybe not the specific names of the victims. There's also no clear-cut evidence that the phrase "jus prima notis" was ever used as the formal name of any law. But you notice, I think that's a bit of a bait and switch. Maybe it didn't have to be an actual law. Now, going back to Wikipedia, there was another word. I decided to pursue another trail that caught my eye, and that word is merchet. Pronounced something like merchant. Merchet, though, I think that's correct. M-E-R-C-H-E-T, of which it is said, the medieval marriage fine. Now this starts to make sense. The medieval marriage fine, or merchet, has sometimes been interpreted as a payment for the droit du seigneur to be waived. OED had Merchet, did not have Culliage, but it had Merchet, and it dated it back to 1493. But OED had a slightly different meaning. It does mention it as a fine and rather than a right. So this is what OED said: a fine paid by a tenant or bondsman to his overlord for the right to give his daughter in marriage. Because after all, the feudal lord would be losing some labor. So after this dead end with the word Culliage, I went back to Word Museum to be like, what's up? And I noticed something else. It said, see maiden rent. So I went and looked at maiden rent, and all the dots are starting to connect. It described maiden rent as a fee paid by every tenant in the English manor of booleth. I didn't trace the rabbit trail of booleth at their marriage. It was anciently given to the Lord for his omitting the custom, not law, of marchetta, whereby he was to have the first night's lodging with his tenant's wife. The custom for the Lord to lay the first night with the bride of his tenant was very common, it said, in Scotland and in the north parts of England. But it was abrogated by Malcolm III at the instance of the Queen, and instead, therefore, a mark was paid to the Lord by the bridegroom, from whence 'tis called marchetta mulieris. And the credit for that is given to some author named Blount. I think now we're starting to get what that word meant. Seems like Culliage is the rarer form, but there are other terms that refer to this custom or practice, if it existed. I found another reference, I think it was in Wikipedia, that mentioned Ferdinand II of Aragon. Reminded me of the Tudors, Catherine of Aragon, and Article 9 of the Sententia Arbitra de Guadalupe and the cited critical worth of Haworth, W.D., 1971. And I want to dig up this paper entitled Droit de Seigneur, Fact or Fantasy in the Journal of European Studies. If you happen to have that, I would love to see it. It's on pages 291 through 312, which sounds fascinating, but way more in depth than this channel is for. So what do you think? Fact or fantasy? I tend to think it's a little of both. While we're still left with a mystery as to the original word I chose, perhaps of an ancient, terrifying custom that I hope isn't true, I do think there is a rancid kernel of truth popping in there. So if you like what I'm doing, please consider subscribing to my political commentary channel, Pink Flame of Liberty. I also have a channel where I give quick parliamentary tips at Pink Parliamentarian. But I appreciate your time. Hit the subscribe button for this one. Turn on the notification bell. And until I talk with you again, I hope you have an awesome whatever it is in your wonderful part of the world. Till next time.